Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this daily science fiction extravaganza, commonly known as Tales from Outer Space. Taken from the subreddit HFY. All the relevant links will be down below. And, as always, I hope that you enjoy. And if you do, please consider supporting the channel. On to the science fiction. Story number 1. Humans are weird. Jump scare. Secondary visiting ranger, 4th sister Rost when she handed him the soil probe. The brilliant yellow sun shone down on the frozen landscape. She would never have dared venture out of such a place herself without the presence of a true mammal. Even with her insulation gear that muted the sound of even loud conversation, she could already feel the air draining her core warmth. Fortunately, humans were rather loud when it came to communication. Even so, the grunt the human gave in reply did not seem to contain any words, but she was learning that humans were rather imprecise when it came to casual verbal communication. So, she took it as permission to continue. Are you currently in a state of, I believe the word is feud, with the primary visiting ranger, she asked. Primary? Oh, you mean Bob, human said. Yes, she replied. The human took a moment to shift the hood on the sparker he was wearing around his tiny audio sensor and did not expose the round little lumps of skin. A state of feud, his lips turned down in a gesture that either displeasure or thought, not that I know of. Why? Well, given that he's about to, 4th sister began. The still, thick atmosphere was split by a high-pitched shriek as primary visiting ranger leapt out from behind a shrubbery and grasped second visiting ranger. 4th sister felt her frill snapping against the interior of her thermal wear in confusion. Primary visiting ranger was perhaps in full body length of secondary visiting ranger, but there was no way the human could physically touch others from a distance. However, secondary visiting ranger still leapt back with a vocalization that she was fairly certain counted as profanity. She stooped over to pick up a probe secondary visiting ranger had dropped. Really, Bob? Secondary visiting ranger demanded. His hand clutched over his primary circulatory pump. Really? Primary visiting ranger was laughing in delight to such an extent that 4th sister was somewhat concerned for his health. He doubled over and braced himself with his arms and his knees. Oh yeah, Mac, he finally gasped. Really, you should have seen your face. Real mature, secondary visiting ranger muttered. She could not see under his goggles, but from the flexing and exposed muscles, she presumed that he was performing the odd ritual of rolling his eyes that was so very disturbing. Insert organs should not move in that manner. Is this an amusing encounter or an antagonistic one? 4th sister asked as she handed secondary visiting ranger the soil probe. Amusing, primary visiting ranger started firmly, all his teeth showing in a wide grin. Not antagonistic, secondary visiting ranger spoke in the same time. Just annoying and immature. You needed the cardio anyway, primary visiting ranger said. He straightened up and strode past him, not breaking stride, but managed to clout secondary visiting ranger on the shoulder with those built-in clubs humans were so infamous for. See you back at base, Mac, he said cheerfully. Not if I see you first, secondary visiting ranger muttered. End of story. Story number 2. Loathesome, written by 33_4P3. Rogars hated humans. She hated everything about them. She hated their faces, their fleshy and hairless like nugs. She hated their eyes, spread from their skull like tiny wings. As if they tried to escape the loathsome creature that they were attached to. She hated their eyes, their small and weak, their cities burning through her retina, an ultraviolet light that they couldn't even perceive. She hated their hair, just another remnant of a wretched tree-dwelling creature that dared fathered such abominations. But first and foremost, she hated the pathetic excuses for teeth that they smiled at her with, as if they were friends. She hated their stubby thumbs, devoid of claws and use, as if nature itself had looked down upon humans with nothing but contempt. She hated how they were so small and frail, a female like her easily eclipsing them in height and able to splinter and shatter their bones with the real hands their gods had gifted to them. She hated how easily they bled, how easily they died. But most of all, she hated how she was reliant on them. The fire still raging, black smoke still rising, the smell of charred flesh still lingering in the air. These humans had come, they had set up camp, they'd given them food and shelter, bandaged the wounded, and helped dig graves for the deceased. They had stolen their convictions, every like-minded voice ready to start marching alongside the armies for blood, glory, and revenge had died down, the rifle blaze in their eyes replaced by the dull cloud of mourning. They placated them, kept them complacent like cattle with their offers of refuge. Oh, how she hated the fools that she was ashamed to call her birth parents that had made the decision to abandon hers and their own home world. The moment the shuttle closed, bringing them far away from their rightful place at the front lines, ready to replay blood for blood. It was at that moment Rogars knew she hated everything about humans. She hated how they didn't believe that the damned philosopher lizards had started the war. She hated how she could scream at them, challenge them to a duel so she could tear them to shreds, and they would politely smile and ask her to leave. She had never been so insulted in her life. These were the creatures she was dependent on, and they were nothing but another enemy, in cahoots with the lizard men. She hated how their media talked about the war under the pretense of coldness and dispassion, sadness glinting in the presenter's eye. She hated how they debated ethics and morality in times of war. Nothing more than propaganda for her enemy. But more than anything, she hated how she would cheer whenever they showed images of another city burning, just to have the pleasant feeling turn into some more seething hatred as she could see their convoys roll in, offering their humanitarian aid under the pretense of impartiality. He hated how they believed the obviously doctored footage of their people's soldiers putting down the lizard men like the squirming pests they were. She hated how they sanctioned her nation, how they accused them of war crimes under the idiotic notion that there were some things off limits in war. But most of all, she hated how they had attacked her nation after making up an invasion by her people on their systems ready enough to qualify them as a nation in the first place. How far everyone on that small number of ships with their minuscule fleet, 3 of her people, were shredded. She hated how their entire society seemed to jump to aid the military, to aid old admirals that came out of retirement to command the swarm of newly built ships that spat into orbit. She hated how they pushed her people's military back, how they besieged their planets, how they never stopped until they reached the core worlds, and then to spit in their faces and make peace. She wanted to choke them, to rip them to shreds, to bathe in their blood and float just a few millimeters from their skin. But she would wait until they no longer held her life in their hands. Then she would pay them back. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this dose of science fiction fun. I hope that you enjoyed. And if you did, please don't forget to support the author from the link down below. But if you want to support this channel, there are links as well down below for you to help with. But the easiest way would be to share this video. And if you are so inclined, subscribe as well. I will see you all in the next episode, and I hope that you all have a fantastic time until then. Cheers.